Right, Gaz, firstly, welcome back, mate. What does it feel like to be back at the Dragons?
Yeah, great. I'm very excited to be back. But in saying that, I know that I've got a lot of hard work to do. They're in a winning way at the moment, the Dragons, and it seems like everyone's happy and well at the club. So I had to work hard to fit into that.
And been away for 2 years, but the choice to come back to rugby league, why is that?
Purely because I think as I've had time over there I think when you're over there and you realise you're coming towards the back end of your career, you set your priorities differently, and one of them was definitely to win a comp, and definitely at the Dragons. They've been such a good club to me, and I know that I'd like to think I've been good to them, and hence why they've let me back into their winning culture.
And you mentioned obviously the club being good to you, being good to the club. It was always going to be the Dragons?
Yeah, look, I was very open and honest with Gasnier and George and Wayne as well. I had a conversation with Wayne back in February, and we spoke about a lot of things, and I said to Gasnier, I only ever wanted to play at St George, but I did want to play rugby league, and providing they couldn't do it, I'd give them every opportunity to make sure that they could do it, and we'd work together. But if they couldn't, then I would have to, reflect on the fact that I might have had to play elsewhere.
And obviously good mates still at the club, and you attended your wedding and so on. You've obviously kept tabs on what the Dragons have been up to.
Yeah, I have. And if I didn't keep a tab, I was definitely, certainly to get an update from Mum and Dad, because they're still avid supporters and still go down to Cogra quite a bit. So they just seem so happy. I think it's probably the best way to put it. They're very happy with the way things are working. They're obviously happy that they're winning, but most of all, they're enjoying their football.
And 2010, what's impressed you with the Dragons?
Consistency. I think the way that every time one of the younger guys has come into grade, they've played really well, and it seems like they've fitted straight in. The confidence has been there, and to me, I think that's a big sign that the culture is really working well for the young guys to have that confidence to do that. So, looking from the outside in, I think their culture seems like a very good one, and their consistency to produce players that step up to the mark when, like the rep guys are out.
And personally, what do you think you can add to that?
Look, I hope that I can, hopefully play some okay football again, and, I guess play to my strengths, and hopefully, fit into the team the best I can. And, I'm sure Wayne will have plans in doing that. And, I don't expect things to click straight away. I expect it to take some time, and I just plan on working well with the team and with Wayne in order to get the best out of me.
And obviously the nucleus of the teams remain the same. There's still a number of, similar faces there. But do you still feel like, it'll be a first day at school type thing when you get there?
I do, actually, to be honest. Yeah, I think when you're out of a place for a while, it just feels like you don't feel not a part of it, but you do feel like you've got to earn your stripes again, without a doubt. And I'm prepared to do that. And as you said, it is exciting. Maybe it's something I needed too. So as I said, I'm really looking forward to being back.
And obviously you've played at the top level before, and been in the game for a long time. Do you see any changes or differences to the game of league?
Yeah, I think video ref decisions have been a pretty confusing one, but look, referee isn't an easy job. I think the emphasis on the wrestling around the ruck, I think it's not just 4 or 5 teams leading the pack these days. You've got, every single team working hard to slow the play the ball down, and they're so well drilled that, probably 7 out of 10's time people do get on their back and people are peeling off. And as well as I think the size of the young guys coming through. It seems like every player coming through is like 6'3" and maybe 100 kilo and athletic, and maybe I think that's a sign of where the game's heading.
And personal level, how's Mark Gasnier spent the last 2 years?
To be honest, I've had a great last 2 years. I've learned a lot, both on and off the field. I really enjoyed my time over there. But as I said, there was still that thing in the back of the mind to come back and play rugby league. But as far as life and education away from football, I think Europe definitely teaches you a lot, and just to live overseas, I think, puts a lot of things into perspective.
And some of the highlights whilst you've been away?
It's definitely the travelling. I got to see pretty much all of Europe. There's a big list. I'm not going to go into everywhere I went, but to travel Europe in summer, I think, is a completely different feel. And to play we had some really big games, Heineken Cup games, normal games at Stade de France in front of like 80,000. They're experiences that I won't forget. So, all in all, yeah, a really good time.
And just finally, 4.5-year deal, it's long term. Is this where you're going to stay?
Oh, yeah, this is why I signed to the end. But in saying that, if I'm not playing well towards the back end of my career and time's had enough, I definitely won't be standing in the way of any good young players coming through. I've come back thinking I can get back to my best, and as I said, with the emphasis on winning a premiership. if I was ever to get a tap on the shoulder from Wayne and, you know, time was on, I would move on. I'm not going to, you know, you've got people like Kyle Stanley and good young kids coming through, so I won't be stopping there, progressing